So thank you, Dr. Schober. I am Zach Whaley, and I'm going to present to you a little bit more today about my experiences in Indonesia. But first, I wanted to start with a really big thank you to all of the people that made this trip possible. So first and foremost is Bill Sage, who's joining us today, and the Sage Family Foundation for providing the funding that allowed me to go to Indonesia, as well as the Center for Asian Research for facilitating the whole process. And then some of the other people who have helped me along the way have been Dr. Lundry, Jackie, who's also here, and then Dr. Katie Kramer and Dr. Candace Carr-Kelman. All these people helped me plan my trip, gave me advice and support, and connected me with resources that allowed me to make this a really successful trip. So big thank you to all of those people. So just a quick background about me for people who don't know, but I have 2 majors and a minor. My first major is biological sciences, and I concentrate in conservation biology and ecology. And then I have another major in global health, as well as a minor in poli-sci, like Dr. Schober mentioned. So a lot of my interests and my research focus on the intersections of policy, health, and conservation. So I really love to learn about how conservation and conservation policy influence human health outcomes. So I'm really big into outdoor activities. Here's some pictures of me doing different things outdoors. This is me backpacking in Zion National Park and I think this is in Colorado. And then I actually also am a biologist for the Arizona Game and Fish Department. So this summer I spent some time backpacking for them as well, doing some small mammal field work. So that is kind of my goal in the future, is to go into social ecology, which has been a huge, contribution to that goal, to go on this trip and learn more about Indonesia and the social ecology of reef fisheries there, because I've really been able to find my passion for social ecology and learning about human dimensions of conservation. So that's been really great. I also speak Indonesian and Spanish. Spanish is my best language, but I learned Indonesian so that I could go on this trip, like I foresaw going to Indonesian in the future. So I started taking Indonesian language classes my junior year and have continued with my practice throughout this whole time. And then Spanish, and then a little bit of Portuguese as well. I'm a big foodie and I love dancing and music. So all of those things were great in Indonesia. They have a really rich musical history, as well as the dancing there is really great. And the food is also amazing and really diverse. So for people who aren't familiar with Southeast Asia, which I'm guessing is not many people here, this is like a map of Indonesia. And highlighted in green. It's a huge country. It's the 4th most populous country in the world. And my 2 big study sites were in Padang in West Sumatra and Raja Ampat in West Papua. So those are the 2 places I spent most of my time in, although I flew in to Jakarta and spent like 2 or 3 days kind of exploring that city as well. But most of my time was spent in those 2 completely far opposite sides of the country, not just geographically, they're also completely different culturally, the religion is different, the food, ethnicity, everything is completely different. So it provided a really good experience for me to compare and contrast the 2 places and how they manage their fisheries and how these fisheries are like a really important part of both cultures. So I'm first going to talk a little bit more about the fun stuff that I did while I was there and then dig a little bit more into the research. So my first portion of my trip was spent in Padang, which is the capital of Sumatera Barat, which is West Sumatra, the province. And I spent some time there. I have an old Indonesian professor who lives there, so he was able to show me around a little bit. And so we went to go out to eat. West Sumatra is famous in all of Asia for the sederhana style like eating, where they basically bring to your table like a huge assortment of dishes, and you get to just choose what you want and eat it. And they only charge you for the dishes that you eat, but you get to see everything. And one trick that my professor taught me actually is that you can take the sauce from dishes that you don't want to eat and they don't charge you for it. So you can grab some rice and then take the sauce and then just call it good. But a huge part of what I really loved in Indonesia in general was the architecture, especially in Sumatera Barat, because they have this amazing Minangkabau, which is the indigenous group that's prevalent there, architecture, which is really, they have these like pointed roofs, as you can see on my presentation. So as they adopted Islam, they started creating mosques in this style instead of like the more minaret rounded dome style. So that is a really cool place that I was able to go, is Masjid Raya Sumatra, which is the Grand Mosque of West Sumatra. And it's a really beautiful building. You can see on the inside that there are just amazing ceilings and geometric patterns, and that was just really cool being able to experience that culture, because here in the US I haven't been exposed as much to Islam, but it was a really amazing experience to be able to see that in Indonesia. It was one of my favorite parts, listening to the prayers every day, the call to prayer and the singing from the mosque. So that was really great. That was probably like my first impression as well when I made it there, was just, you know, Islam is so prevalent. It's really beautiful. So after a few days in Padang, my old professor and I, so this is Afri, Mas Afri, we actually traveled inland from Padang, which is on the coast, and we were able to visit his hometown, Sumber Kudus, which is a really tiny town in the middle of the rubber plantations in inland Sumatra. We spent a few days in Bukit Tinggi and Padang Panjang, which are just two different cities there. And we were able to make some really cool visits to different places. So this is like a traditional Minang palace. And that was probably the biggest culture shock that I got when I was there, was people asking to take pictures with me. And that happened a lot when I was there, because here in the US, usually you could like pay to take pictures with people in traditional costume. But in Sumatra Barat, people in traditional costume were asking me. So it was like a weird reversal of roles that I was not prepared for. But we went and did that and saw some of the more traditional rice farming villages on the slope of Mount Merapi, which is an active volcano right outside of Bukit Tinggi in Sumatra Barat. And it actually just erupted, I think a month or two ago. So I missed that by a few months, but that was really amazing. I love mountains, so it was really amazing seeing that. Let's see. Oh, so this is me visiting his family in Superkulu. So he has a lot of sisters, my old professor, and I was able to spend some time with them and see how they lived. They were very, very welcoming. They took me into the family and let me stay in like the nicest room. And just the hospitality was amazing. It was incredible. And I definitely exercised my Indonesian a lot, because and grew a lot in that way as well, because most people do not speak English in the more rural parts of Indonesia. So some other pictures, they have beautiful waterfalls. This is in Superkudus as well. This is Nerai Siana Rock. It's a little bit of a tongue twister in West Sumatra. So it's like a really pretty canyon beneath the volcano. And then here's some rice paddies that are owned by my friend's family. And then this upper right picture is also really, upper left on your side, is a really cool story. So there's this hillside in Superkudus that is sacred to the locals. So usually it's customary every time you visit as a visitor from the outside to plant a tree on the slope. And unfortunately, they don't really like have trees available. So my professor, like for sale, they used to sell them at the site. You could like buy it and plant it there. But people will symbolically just plant like a branch or a stick. So I was able to take part in that tradition, and that was really cool. And then they just have this awesome skyline of Gunung Seribu is 1,000 mountains. So just these beautiful limestone cliffs that kind of stretch out with the morning mist into the jungle. And that was a really amazing experience as well, to be invited to partake in that. So after visiting Sumatra, I then made my way back to Padang. I spent a few days there doing my research and meeting with NGOs there, and then went to Raja Ampat, the far other side of the country, if you remember from the map. So Raja Ampat is really famous for its beaches and reefs. So a lot of my pictures are of the really beautiful ocean there. So they have the most amazing sunsets, the clearest water I've ever experienced, and the beaches are really empty too as well. So you can see like here at the last place I stayed, there wasn't even another person there. So I just had the whole island to myself. It's a really small island. So that was really amazing. So just to visualize where I was, Raja Ampat actually means 4 kings. And there's a whole legend about the creation of Raja Ampat, and depending on who you ask, it's different. So I won't get like super into that. If you have questions, talk to me afterwards. But basically the 4 big islands that are like the 4 kings are Waigeo, Gam, Batanta, and then Misul is down below off the map. And it's really isolated, so I did not go there. But basically what I did was I flew into Sorong, and then you take a ferry to Waigeo, to the city of Waisai. And then after that, every single trip is made by longboat, which is really scary sometimes on if like the waves are a little bit more choppy. So that definitely tested like my adventure limits. I've never experienced anything like that. Just tipping back and forth, and you're like out in the middle of the ocean. So I spent some time in Waigeo. Then I took a longboat to Kri. This is actually 2 islands. It's hard to tell from the map, but there's like Kri is the smallest island. And this is the diving hotspot of the whole archipelago. And then a really small island called Arborek. And then I spent my last time on this really tiny little island you can even really see in the Pam Islands, which are right here. So a lot of the stuff I did while I was in Raja Ampat revolved around, well, I mean the whole trip, but especially in Raja Ampat, was around like diving and seeing the coral reefs. It was a little bit harder in Padang because their reefs are really degraded and have been destroyed a lot by overfishing, pollution, and just other stuff like that, or destructive fishing practices. But in Raja Ampat, they have some of the most pristine reefs in the world, and actually the highest, I think they have the record for the most species of fish spotted on a single dive on Kri, off the coast of Kri. So it's a real, people travel from all over the world to go diving. So of course I had to go while I was there. So here's some pictures of me diving in different places around Kri. And this is an Arborek, just around the whole area. I was also able to dive on a World War II airplane wreck. So you can see those pictures. That was really amazing, like experiencing that history and how well preserved it is. I love turtles, so that was really amazing, be able to see the turtles and dolphins and lots of other marine animals. So yeah, it was a really cool experience, especially because I'd only ever done diving in the Caribbean, and the Indo-Pacific definitely blows that out of the water, literally. So that was an amazing experience. So some of my favorite experiences in Papua were trying the food there. So they have amazing seafood, as you can imagine, but it was just really cool. And I'm really passionate about food systems and global like health outcomes, obviously. So it was really cool learning about more of their traditional foods there. So on the top is just a meal of, it's really small, but it's a meal of tuna steaks and squid, which was really great to try. And then I actually convinced one of my hosts when I was in Raja Ampat to teach me how to make their traditional papeda, which is a kind of a stew made out of sago palm starch. So they just boiled palm starch and it makes this like gelatinous, you can kind of see like the texture just from this, but they were really great and taught me how to do that. So that was really nice of them. And then you just add it to fish stew, knead it with that. So that's their traditional food, like carb rather than rice. It's been more replaced with rice as Indonesia's kind of forcing Papua to assimilate. And then my very favorite thing in Papua were these green crepes. And I do not know what they're called or anything, but that was the best thing I had. I think actually in all of Indonesia, they were so good. And they would give us like fresh fruit in the morning. So that was really great to eat that with like mangoes or dragon fruit. Buah naga is dragon fruit. So that was probably my favorite food. Okay, yeah, and a little bit more about the culture in Papua, because this will be really important to my research. So it's actually majority Christian. So it was definitely way different than Sumatra, going from having mosques everywhere to having churches like on every single island, sometimes multiple within a village. So that was really cool. So the churches are absolutely stunning there. I really loved this, the architecture as well was just very different, but still really beautiful in Papua, where they often build their houses on stilts over the water traditionally. And my first host was able, well, so my Indonesian isn't super great, but he was able to explain to me like more about like how they do it and how this tradition is passed on through generations. And that was really amazing as well. And then the fishing culture in Raja Ampat is absolutely insane. They teach kids, like I saw kids as young as like 3 or 4 years old fishing on the reefs without like adult supervision. So their skill level is just crazy. They know so much about, they have lots of local and traditional ecological knowledge, which was also really cool to see, because I can't imagine American children like just going out with hooks and doing this, but their kids are just so knowledgeable and smart and really know a lot about how to fish and be safe about it. So this is like a haul that I saw from one of the children in on the first island that I visited, and she allowed me to take a picture of the fish she caught. So these are just, I think, 2 different species of scad, and they come in when the tide goes out, and then you can just see there's like 30 kids out on the reef just fishing by themselves, and they're like having fun while they're doing it. It's a really cool social activity. So that was really great to observe for my project. So in the Raja Ampat, probably the most scenic place that I visited was Piainemo. So this is what Raja Ampat is very, very famous for, are their karst limestone islands that form these beautiful lagoons of just like amazing colors. It's absolutely breathtaking. So I was also able to do some hiking here and snorkeling as well. So that was a really cool experience. I feel like definitely the prettiest place I went when I was in Raja Ampat.
Where were you when you took the picture on the right? What was the thing?
So this is actually this is not my picture on the right. It's my friends. I met some people from France. There's a ton of backpackers that go through that area, and they had a drone. So I asked them to send me the picture because I do not have a drone. So they were really kind and allowed me to use their picture, but I was not like flying or hiking or anything that high, but that was a really great opportunity. So this is one that I took myself from like a lookout. You can hike up to. So the last activity I did while I was there was bird watching. And I had to go because birds of paradise are endemic to Australasia. They only occur there. And I'm a huge biologist. I love animals and stuff. So it was really cool being able to see this. And they're also a really culturally important group of birds because their feathers were traditionally used in the headdresses of Papuan, indigenous Papuan tribes. And that's kind of changed now because the government has restricted harvest of these birds. So it was really cool being able to talk to my guide about that dynamic and how their traditional harvesting has changed since Indonesia has kind of come in and said like, oh, you can't do this, or, you know, they've restricted their rights. So this is the Wilson's bird of paradise on the left. And that was definitely my favorite one to see. And then the red bird of paradise right here on the right. So that was absolutely surreal because I grew up watching these in nature documentaries, and seeing them in person was really life-changing. So it was really, really great experience. Okay, so here's some random pictures of my time in Indonesia, just some stuff I wanted to fit in. So another church I saw in the village of Yanbuba on Cree. And then here's me with some of my friends that I made while I was there. So this man is French and these people are all Papuan, but we were able to dive together. So that was really cool. And then this is me with Akil. He was one of my hosts in the Pam Islands, and we bonded over our love for Dolly Parton. He really loves the song Islands in the Stream, and I do too. And actually, as a coincidence, it is Dolly Parton's birthday today. So I should probably text him or something and be like, oh, we should listen to that. But yeah, so he's a friend I made, and we went to Pianemo together. And then this is one of the fish markets I visited in Padang with some of the NGO leaders there. From Cahaya Maritim is the NGO I was able to talk with. And so this is me trying to lift a tuna, but they're extremely heavy, so I did not do it successfully. And I'm actually wearing the same outfit as I am now, so it's kind of funny. Okay, so getting to more serious stuff. My project, I was inspired originally to learn about like local ecological knowledge and traditional ecological knowledge. And I work in a coral reef lab right now as an undergrad with Dr. Kramer, who I talked about a little bit earlier. But in developing my honors thesis, I wanted to learn more about how the intersections of like local ecological knowledge and coral reefs, especially because I'm really passionate about food security, food sovereignty. So basically, I started from the premise that like coral reefs are a really incredibly important food source for many coastal people, especially in Indonesia. However, this food source is very threatened by myriad factors, including overfishing, climate change, and destructive fishing practice. So in Indonesia, it's really common to have dynamite fishing or cyanide fishing, which are really terrible for the reefs. And they might have short-term payoffs, but in the long term, it really harms communities that are nearby these reefs because they need that reef for cultural reasons, for as a nutritional resource. So because Southeast Asia is one of the most biodiverse regions in the world, I really wanted to focus my research on there. And Indonesia actually has the most biodiverse reefs in the world in Raja Ampat. Like I said, they have the record for the most fish seen in a single dive. So I really wanted to focus my research on there. So for people who don't know much about coral reefs, this is the coral triangle. It's basically this geographic region that contains most of the world's coral reef biodiversity. So as you can see, it includes West Papua. This area is called the Bird's Head Archipelago. And that's where I was, and that's a really biodiverse region, as I said. And it extends all the way to the Solomon Islands, west to East Kalimantan, and then, or Borneo, you might know it as, and then up to the Philippines as well. So to kind of focus my interests, I decided to approach them through the lens of food sovereignty, which is defined as the right of peoples to healthy and culturally appropriate food produced through ecologically sound and sustainable methods, and the right to define their own food and agricultural systems, which is kind of a step beyond food security. So food security is generally the lens through which people view issues of food rights and stuff like that. And that's basically just, oh, do people have enough to eat? But food sovereignty is beyond that and extends it, and it's more of a political concept. And it also just ensures that people have greater control over what they're eating. They're not just eating like, I don't know. So for example, in Papua, they're not just being given like cheap processed food to like meet their nutritional needs. They have access over their traditional like harvesting rights and stuff like that, things that are culturally important for them. Or in, actually I will say, in Padang or West Sumatra, this would include in Muslim nations, like not giving them foods that aren't halal. So that's a really good example. So some of the goals of my project were to compare and contrast the status of food sovereignty between Kota Padang and Raja Ampat, and to describe the contributions that coral reef fisheries make to coastal communities in cultural, social, and economic ways. So I actually have written like a really long research paper on this, and I'm presenting in March. So if anyone would like to come to my thesis defense, they can come to that. But basically the snapshot of that in a nutshell is that coral reefs are, I found that they are really integral to food sovereignty of Raja Ampat. And they also are a huge contribution to food sovereignty in Kota Padang. This is due to different reasons though in different places. So if you aren't familiar with the history of Papua, they were also colonized by the Netherlands, as well as the rest of Indonesia, but they were actually administered separately. So Western Indonesia was under one like colonial rule, and then Eastern Indonesia actually they gained their independence later, whereas Western Indonesia got it in 1949. It was officially granted by the Netherlands. Eastern Indonesia got it, I think, in the 60s, so quite a bit later. But Indonesia just kind of absorbed them into the republic, even though there have been numerous referendums to leave. Both Maluku and Papua have tried to leave the republic. It has been violently like forced to stay, and they're very, very different. They're Melanesian, whereas most of the rest of Indonesia is Malay. There's like a lot of accusations of racism that occur in Indonesia between the police and the army from Indonesia coming in and attacking and using violence to kind of subdue any sort of independent movements that happen in Papua and Maluku as well. So that has been a huge factor in the change of food sovereignty within Papua, because they have leveraged conservation movements to kind of deprive indigenous people of their traditional food sources. And they've also racialized foods. So traditionally Papuans would hunt and gather in the forest a lot, but under the Indonesian government, they've kind of portrayed that as savage or uncivilized. So it's changed the attitude towards these traditional food sources and kind of shifted their diet more away from sago palm starch to rice and away from like wild gathered tubers, meats and stuff like that to more processed foods that are imported from Western Indonesia, which gives them a lot more power over these people. So that's been a huge loss of food sovereignty for Papua, and why the reefs are so important for coastal villages, because they haven't completely succeeded at taking that away yet. And it's also a really important part of, so therefore it's like a really important part of maintaining that food source so they don't lose that like last pillar of food sovereignty. So in Kota Padang, it's a very different story. They aren't nearly as food insecure as West Papua or Papua in general. So in general, they have much better nutrition. However, a lot of what I learned from talking to the NGOs there is that their crop biodiversity and the plants that are offered as food sources has greatly decreased recently. And a lot of that is because of globalization and urbanization, and then different issues of environmental injustice that have threatened the food sovereignty in Kota Padang. So that's a really big issue. But in Kota Padang, the reef fish still are able to contribute because they've lost so much in other areas. The coral reefs are a really important like factor in ensuring that they have continued food sovereignty. And then I also found, this was really cool, and it's kind of obvious if you think about it, but it wasn't something that fully like clicked in my brain, but just the extent to which reef fish connect communities. So I would always ask like our hosts in Raja Ampat where they got the fish from, and they would say, oh, my friend or my like relative, my brother brings it. And it was really cool seeing these fish like move through communities and strengthen relationships. And they just provide I don't know, not an excuse, like a mechanism for strengthening these social ties. And sometimes when the villages would have celebrations, I would like walk up and see like all the stuff that they had out, and it was all reef fish. So it's really cool seeing how that is just such an important part of their culture, and it really brings people together in that way. And then similarly in Padang, Padang is much more densely occupied, so it's a little bit of a different story, but because they're so, the human population is so dense, they have traditional markets called pasar that people visit, and the fish market is a really big part of that. So if the fish market were to go away, it would mean a huge loss for the rest of the pasar. But the pasar is really cool because in my own experience with like supermarkets and some of the literature I've been able to read about like the sociology of supermarkets versus these traditional markets in Indonesia, you just obtain so much more social connection through visiting a pasar. There's like so many more people that are strengthened along the way, and then a lot more diverse foods are offered at these traditional pasars, and also in many different qualities. So it's a really important part of the food security and food sovereignty of these communities, and coral reef fish are a really big part of that as well. So those are kind of some of my preliminary. And then if we had time, I'm not sure, I went a little bit over, but I wanted to just show some quick videos from my time there. So this is when I visited Sumber Kulus. So this is my friend, my old professor's sister, grinding up spices to put in our dinner. So I thought that was really cool, because I love cooking. And then this is at the fish market in Padang. One of the sellers like descaling a fish. You can kind of see just the diversity of fish, even just at that one seller. So we have like red snappers here. And then I'm not sure what the other ones are, but the red snappers are also really delicious. So that's a really good really good food. Probably the best thing I had in Padang was ikan bakar, which is like grilled fish, and that was red snapper that I ate. And then just a quick video I took of Pi Nemo. Okay, and I think that's it for me. I have a map, but we're a little bit over time, so thank you for allowing me to present, and I can answer any questions anyone has now. Is that okay, or yeah?
Yes.